Today, I want to answer one very simple question. Is it worth it to specialize in one unit type, either infantry, cavalry, or archers? And I don't want to give you an opinion. I want to give you facts, real data, which is why we came up with a test and ran that test 12 times to make sure that the answer we're giving you wasn't just randomness. So stick around in this video for the actual answer, the data, around whether or not specialization in one unit type is worth it, and by exactly how much. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and in this video sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms, I wanted to answer this very simple question. Is it worth it to specialize in one unit type? And there's a bunch of reasons why specialization could be very good. First of all, the civilization you pick gives you stats for that unit type, which is good. The special unit itself has some bonuses. So if you're field fighting, every march you're bringing is now the special unit, which is amazing. That's a huge boost. And on top of all of that, you also would get the benefit of a really good city skin. You could get an upwards of 10% of boost. So for example, if I went all infantry, I would be getting 10% health on every one of my marches. And okay, there are maybe better examples of city skins that anybody could access from the Season of Conquest, like Divine Abode. You specialize in calves, you could get a 10% boost to the defense of your calves. Now, that's really solid. Every one of your marches would have that benefit, and you would get none of the downside because you'd be bringing all calves, no infantry in this case. So this actually, if you had infantry, right, this is a 20% stat swing where you're losing 10% to now gaining 10% on those marches because you're not bringing infantry, you're bringing all cavalry. So those reasons were so numerous, I thought we have got to come up with a way to test, not just an opinion, but a test that proves to us that, in fact, the special unit going all in, like I'm describing, on one unit type, bringing all commanders, right, that are benefiting that one unit type is worth it. And there's so many commanders in the game now, you probably could come up with a bunch of really good marches. I'm going to talk about that at the end of the video. So how do you test exactly whether or not the special unit is actually better? If all these things, specializing is better. So to do this, we went back to the absolute basics here, 1v1 testing. And I didn't want to do fake marches. We used meta marches for this test. So step one is we set up a punching bag. Abe, thank you for volunteering to be our punching bag. He used Guan and Leonidas, and he used that in every single test. He had no equipment. He had no city skin. He just used the same thing every single time. He put it on the field, and we did this testing in an Ark of Osiris practice match. Now, why do I like practice matches? Because if you see one test result, you literally have no clue if you're observing randomness or the actual average, the actual result you would expect to get. Because there was a ton of randomness. Sometimes Abe won, and sometimes Abe lost. And how do you know, if you're looking at one report, which one reflects reality? So we ran the test 12 times for the following two situations, okay? Oh, and P.S., for whatever it's worth, Abe was the Ottoman civilization, but it doesn't really matter because he's just bringing the same thing every time. So he's the variable that is remaining constant. Or I guess he's not a variable. He remains constant, and the variables are as follows. First, Groggy attacked. He used the German civilization. That is a cavalry special unit, but he brought archers. So he brought the base archers, and he brought Esong as a secondary to Nebu. Okay, so we brought Nebu Esong. We had no equipment. He and I both used this build for what it's worth. And he had no city skin. So it's just base archers, as if it was like an extra march he had in his murder ball, just like it would be today if you're using a march that's like not one of your special unit marches, right? And so he attacked Abe 12 times, and we recorded the data. Then I attacked Abe, and I had a city skin, and I had the civilization, right? I got all the Ottoman benefits, and we ran that test. And we actually ran an additional test where I didn't have the city skin, but I accidentally had Envoy. So we can actually measure the effectiveness of a 10% city skin too, and I have all that data. So now you may be thinking, okay, Chisgules, but like, how do you actually measure? What are you measuring to show, like, did it do better or did it do worse? So it's a good thing I wrote down all the data, because for some reason, none of my favorites are here today. But you may be wondering, Chisgule, how do you actually measure the result here? Like, what's the unit of measure to see how much better it is? And the thing that we look at is the Sev wound differential. In other words, how many severe wounds did I have versus how many severe wounds did you have? And we look at the difference, and that number is what we measure. So for example, if in a battle, I had 20,000 Sev wounds and you had 30,000 Sev wounds, in this case it's Abe, then that's a 10,000 differential, okay? So we're measuring the differential in Sev wounds. And obviously, the more that differential is in my favor, the better I'm doing. And that's what we should see. In fact, that's exactly what we see. So data goes up on the screen for the final trials here, where I had the city skin and everything, like the full kit and caboodle. The differential of actually using the special unit, everything else was constant, right? And of having the right civilization was a boost of about 5,000 Sev wounds. That's kind of a big deal. Now, it's funny, when I asked Groggy and I asked Abe, what amount of Sev wound differential will be enough for you to drop everything and switch to all one unit type, they both said like about 10,000 was the number where, like, holy cow, that would be so obvious you need to switch, that they would go and do that. But 5,000 is still really good. Now, I do need to say, right, there are some things like the Ottoman civilization is giving a 5% skill damage boost, right? This is true, that even if you weren't using the special unit, you would get that benefit. So this might be exaggerating how good a special civilization is by just a little bit, because I was using Ottoman, and you'd still get the skill damage boost, even if you were using cavalry, for example. You just wouldn't have a cav special unit, and you wouldn't be getting a stat boost for it, right? And in fact, my city skin would be giving me a negative effect. So I still feel like that 5,000 number is pretty good to anchor on. And for what it's worth, that number, when I accidentally forgot to put on my city skin and I had the envoy, was about 3,000. So a 3,000 Sev wound differential. Obviously, there are still some flaws with this testing, right? First of all, this is 1v1 testing, but not like an actual open field fight where we're doing like a 5v5 brawl that truly leverages the advantages of being able to bring all the unique effects to the battlefield. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And also, we didn't use any equipment, which could influence the outcome, either exaggerating the result, making the gap even wider, or perhaps it would narrow the gap. And that could be worthy of another video. And if you're interested in that, by the way, throw a like on here and leave a comment so I know that's what you're interested in. Videos like this take freaking a really long time to make, hours literally of testing. So let's talk about what this actually means for you based on your spend level in the game, because I think that's probably the most effective way of actually slicing this up, because depending on how much you spend and how you play, I've got a different recommendation for you based on these results, right? So we'll tell you what this means. And for everybody, right, there's a few things that I want to say, which is, first of all, if you already have been specializing, congratulations, you have intuitively landed on the meta for Rise of Kingdoms. I think that's really strong, and some amount of specialization is definitely worth it, because heck, even the equipment system in this game has, up until this point, rewarded you with more special talents if you're just making the same thing over and over again. And I also want to say, like, look, this is a game. It's supposed to be fun. So if you're the kind of person who, like, really has a lot of fun bringing lots of different troop types, like, you should just do that. Don't sweat it, man. 5,000 differential. It's not that big a deal. Okay, bring what you want. And there are marches that I think are so good, you just bring them anyways. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And also, if you're in the early game, I mean, there's just only so many options for commanders you can be investing in. A lot of what we're going to talk about for specialization is like end game pairs. So the thing to think about for the early game is how you're setting up for when you get to the Season of Conquest. And last, I swear, there's a lot of things here, a lot of considerations. This isn't even last but least. I got a couple more. The other thing you need to be thinking about is your equipment, okay? I already have an incredibly gangbuster set of infantry equipment. In fact, I have 3. So for me, given that I've got legendary equipment that I can't back out of anyways, really, even if I want to, without taking a major hit in terms of the amount of materials I had lost, look, like, you go with your best sets because that offsets the bonuses you're getting anyways from these other things. So if you've already got really good specialized gear, like, dude, don't sweat it. There's advantages to having different marches and being able to bring the best infantry march, the best cav march, the best archer march, right? There's advantages to that, and it's okay too. And that's what I'm planning to do. I'm going to talk about that more in a second. And I also want to mention that if you try to specialize, you will create a resource problem. This is very real. I have seen this myself on my restart project where I have started to specialize infantry. I'm like partway specialized infantry, and I already have 1.6 billion stone. I do not farm any stone. I have not farmed stone in like half a year or more. Okay. And all my other resources were nearly 0. And somehow, like, I'm at like 1.6 billion stone still. It's not going anywhere. So all that to say, you will eventually get a resource problem. You might have to be trading resources to offset the fact that you're going to have like excess of one resource if you really do go all in on one troop type. So there's a disadvantage to that. Now, with all that said, there are some marches that I think are so good that even if you don't have the unit specialization, they're still worth using. So for example, a march that uses William, I think you just got to do it. Like, if you're using William already, no questions asked, you continue to use him because this rage buff and defense buff is amazing. Like, it offsets the fact that, sure, it's not a special unit. You might even have negative stats from your city skin. Doesn't matter. A William march is so good, you bring it anyways. A Tamaris march, for example, if you didn't specialize archers, is still such a strong debuff that if you were using her before, you'd use her anyways, even if you have a different unit specialization. And you could even consider, like, Alexander the Great is so strong that even if you have a different unit specialization, he's probably worth using. That's a little bit of a stretch, honestly, because, like, Alex is, like, good, but obviously not as good as, like, William or Tamaris. But I wanted to give you an infantry example where he's pretty close, right? Like, that damage taken boost to all marches from his expertise. I mean, he's just so good. Like, you probably find a way to just use him anyways. So keep all that in mind. But now let's talk about what you do with the information I just shared about unit specialization. If you're free to play, if you're a mid spender, or if you're a whale, or if you're a new player, going to cover all that. Okay. If you are free to play or very low spending, you're probably bringing only 3 marches anyways, okay? And if you're only bringing 3 marches, then there's a couple configurations here, right? And it's pretty obvious what these would be. They could be 1-1-1, infantry, archer, cavalry. That's where you're bringing marches that are just so high utility, right? Like, I would recommend that if you're bringing like William and Tamaris and an Alex march. And those 3 marches, okay, yep, that's a 1-1-1 situation and it makes sense. But I think you want to navigate more toward a 2-1-0 or a 3-0 situation where 3 of your marches are all in on one unit type. That would be the perfect world. I'm starting to shift that way on my restart now, and I was already specializing infantry. I was already kind of on that plan. This is something that can be a long-term goal, and if you've already got great sets, that's also fine because there's lots of great marches in each unit type, and you're getting, theoretically, like the best of the best from each unit type. There's still great advantage to that. But if you wanted to specialize, 3-0-0, I think would be pretty slick. And that could be a long-term project. From an equipment standpoint, it could be a pain in the butt. And that's a lot easier to do if you're at the start of the game rather than kind of like pretty far along. And again, keep in mind, like a 5,000 differential is good, but not like completely insane. And that was with a 10% skin, which you might not have anyways. So if you're free to play or low spend, consider moving to a 2-1 or a 3-0-0, depending on what your equipment situation and commander situation looks like. And if you've already got expertise commanders, like, you use them because they're really good, okay? If you're a mid spender, your goal is probably, you're using 5 marches, almost certainly, in the open field. I think a good long-term goal is a 3-1-1, okay? You shift toward one unit type, and you're still going to try to get to 5 marches, potentially in the future, you do all 5 marches of one unit type. But 3-1-1, I think, is pretty reasonable, right? So you got like the best of the best infantry. You've got the best of the best cavalry, 1 march of each, and then 3 archer marches. Or you could do that with 3 infantry marches, or I don't know. It's hard to find 3 great cav marches. Don't hate me for saying that. Depends on your murder ball philosophy, right? I like all skill damage, but you get the idea. I think 3-1-1 and maybe a goal of shifting to 5 marches is an okay long-term plan. And as a mega whale, this is kind of a weird situation because you're trying to get to 6 or 7 marches as a big super whale, right? If you're doing Season of Conquest and you're doing the Heroic Anthem or Strife of the Eight, you do eventually get to 7 marches. So what do? Also, the weird thing is, if you want to be a rally or garrison lead, you need a meta set of gear for every unit type. So if you're a big spender, I think the starting point for 5 marches is still 3-1-1. That's still the same starting point as your mid spender. But once you get to 7 marches, I think you want to move into the direction of being 5-1-1. And you can definitely find 5 really good marches for most unit types. I think it's a little bit of a stretch, though, to be perfectly honest. But think about it. A year from now, and this is a long-term project anyways, right? A year from now, there's going to be a lot of really great options for every commander. There's going to be more commanders coming out for each unit type anyways. And there'll be even more commanders potentially, like Trajan that show up that are good with any unit type. And, commanders like that get really interesting because now, whatever unit type you're using, as long as you got the gear to support it, you just shift around the unit you're bringing with Trajan and he's still good. You Trajan archers, you could do that. Trajan infantry, you could do that. Heck, even Trajan calves primary, you could do that too with some other units supporting it, right? Last but not least, and I know this is a lot of talking, but if you're a brand new player, I think it's worth considering a focus. Consider going all in archers. Consider going all in infantry. I don't know that I love all in calves personally, but different players like different things. It also depends on how much you're spending, right? But I think that going all in on one unit type is a pretty easy way to get a little bit of a boost, especially if you haven't already made a ton of equipment. It's only a little bit of a boost. So if you're at the end of this video and you're starting to freak out, don't, because it's only a 5,000 sev wound differential for what we saw. And that's like not the end of the world, one way or the other. If you haven't specialized yet and you have the ability to do so without making sacrifices, I think it's pretty solid and you get a healthy boost. It's something I'm going to be looking at for sure. And if you're a new player, that focus I think is really good. If you have things that make it prohibitive to do that, you've already invested in commanders, you've already got your gear sets, then just use them. And they're awesome. You have them. They're great, right? Like, I really think like having a William is like really insanely good. So like I wouldn't change that, right? I'm going to still be bringing William no matter what, even though I have walked past him. Here we go. Oh my God. Even though I've scrolled past him a bunch of times, right? So if you've already got some investments in other unit types, it's totally fine. You pick a civilization like Ottoman, where you get the benefit of march speed for everything you bring. You get the benefit of the skill damage for everything you bring, right? And so the edge is even more small and incremental. But if you were wondering my opinion of what the ultimate single unit investment is at this moment in time, I actually think it's archers. And I think it's not even like close. I think it's slam dunk archers. Like it's not even remotely close. And why is that? The archers have a decent amount of march speed, and that's more in the newer commanders like Nebu and also in Cyrus. Even El Cid has got some march speed, which is kind of nice. I don't know where I hid my Cyrus these days. There he is, right? They have march speed. Also, archers have a ton of area of effect damage, which you know I'm obsessed with. They also have some really good debuffs, like really good debuffs, right? So Ramses has a really killer healing debuff and defense reduction. Tamaris debuffs skill damage taken, making them take more skill damage. Cyrus has a debuff as well. I mean, if you were going with an all-archer murder ball, you bring Trajan Ethel focused archers Edward and Tamaris. Edward's not my favorite, but you're just mostly bringing it for the Tamaris. Artemisia and El Cid, which, okay, El Cid's not my favorite, but he's still fine. Cyrus and Ram, and Nebu and Esong. And, that's a very respectable all-archer murder ball where you get all the benefits we were talking about earlier. The extra stats from the city skin, and from the civilization, and the special unit. And that probably offsets the fact, a little bit, that they're not El Cid's not the best of the best, nor is Edward, right? But it's offset a little bit. And for what it's worth, if you were making an infantry murder ball, I think it would be Trajan, Ethel, Guan, Leo, Alex, and CJ, who, I'm working on him. We streamed that the other day. Pakal Harold is, I think, really strong as an open field pair. Then Constantine Moulin. I don't love the Constantine Moulin, but that's the 5 infantry you would bring. If you were doing cavalry, you would do Trajan, Ethel, Saladin, Moulin, probably. I don't love it, but the cav options were a little bit limiting here. Saladin, Moulin. You would do XY with William. I still think you'd probably bring that. You'd bust out Attila Takeda. So not actually benefiting from the Trajan, a little awkward. And then Chandra Khan. You could do that for your 5 cav marches. And if you were wondering what I think were the must-bring marches from each pairing, I think William with something, as I mentioned earlier, you make an exception to bring Saladin William or XY William. I think that's a must-bring cav march. For archers, I think the Tamaris, if you're bringing a skill damage murder ball, which you should be, is must-bring. And I think in the best case, it's Artemisia Tamaris. In a worst case, it's Edward Tamaris. Okay, and I've talked about why I don't love Edward in a lot of videos. And if you're bringing an infantry pair, one only infantry pair, I think that the best option you could bring is probably Guan Alex. Okay, the silence from the Guan is undeniable, and the shielding from the Alex and utility from the all damage boost is actually really great. So if you were looking at what are the exception marches, I think those are 3 really solid exception marches. But what do you think? Leave a comment down below with what those would be and how you would approach this. I'm sure there's a lot more thought that could go into this, but let me tell you, with potentially 2 new archers around the corner, right? The archer murder ball is only going to get better. And I think what I shared as those 5 marches was really respectable. And if it gets even better than that, I'm just saying archers are looking real good. It's looking like a real good time in the game to be specialized in archers, in my opinion. So again, if you haven't specialized, don't panic. It's totally fine. If you have the opportunity to shift your focus with minimal sacrifice, then I think it's reasonable to do so to get that incremental bonus. And I think it is incremental. It's below the threshold where I would say must do, go for it right away. And if you want to see more testing, legit more testing, even though this takes forever to do, throw some darn likes on this video and leave a comment so that I know you really are serious about seeing more testing, and maybe we could whip up a way to test a murder ball that's specialized versus a murder ball that's not, and find a good approach that gets a consistent result. And we'll see if we can actually measure the effect of specialization versus the diversity of different commander types, okay? Leave that comment. And until next time, you have fun smashing the kingdom.